Violino Chime. Hey everybody, Itzli here. I'm gonna just talk about pozole because there's been a really interesting TikTok dialogue around this and around the idea that pozole was used originally with human meat and or human flesh in pre-Columbian times. So this is a very prevalent thing that you'll see. I mean, if you just type in history of pozole, you'll run into all kinds of articles about this. And I had never thought about it to kind of research it, but these TikTokers, they made me really think about it, and I looked up the sources and figured out that no, pozole was not made with human meat. And so I'm going to go over the sources and talk about how this idea came about. And so I'm just going to start by showing you the actual TikTok videos. Okay, so here we go. So this is the video I think that kind of just started the conversation. And so I'll play it and then you'll see the subsequent TikToks as well.
So during the holiday season, I often come across memes and posts that suggest that pozole was made with human flesh prior to European contact. Now, this is just one of many lies perpetuated and created by the Spaniards in order to justify their own brutality against Native Americans. What we do know is that Friar Bernardino de Sahagún in his codexes describes a specific dish called tlacatlaoli. Now, I believe that tlacatlaoli is often confused for pozole because tlacatlaoli is also described as a stew made with hominy. But tlacatlaoli does not survive into the modern day Mexican cuisine like pozole does. So they may in fact not be the same thing. Not only that, but Sahagún never says that in the codexes that tlacatlaoli is made with human flesh. What he does say is that during the festivals, Huitzilopochtli, sacrifices were made, and then pieces of those sacrifices were served alongside the dish, the stew. It wasn't made with the meat. So it is also very important to highlight that Sahagún never says that he saw people actually eating the pieces of flesh. So they may have just been some sort of ceremonial or spiritual garnish. And even that in itself may sound a little bit wild, but the fact is that he never actually specifically said that people were eating this piece of flesh. He just said it was served alongside the tlacatlaoli, alongside the stew. Now, there's also an anthropologist in 1977, his name is Michael Harner, who suggested that because of the lack of cows and pigs in the Americas, Mesoamericans were eating each other in order to supplement their needs for protein. But this is a downright lie because we know that turkeys were already domesticated. Chapulines, which is still a very popular snack in Mexico, are very high in protein. They were hunting deer and fishing. And when you put corn through the nixtamalization process, it also becomes really good in nutrients and in protein, and especially when served alongside beans and squashes. So people in Mesoamerica were getting enough protein and vitamins without the need to cannibalize each other. So I will tag some other historians and other fans and lovers of Mesoamerican history on this post, and hopefully they can elaborate a little bit more and give some more information. So hopefully this kind of helps to start to dispel this myth. That's Kamati.
Okay, so that was all, really good information in that video. I'm gonna go ahead and break it down. Like I said, just walk you through the sources so you get a little bit better idea, in case you need to disprove this with anybody, you have the sources here at your hand. Every source that I go through, I'm gonna link in the description so you can have that as well. So yes, no, pozole was not made with human meat. This is a picture of people cooking somebody and eating the leg. And so every time you see an article about pozole's so-called history, or in this case, dark history, right? They always put the same picture every single time. And so, man, I combed through the Florentine Codex and tried to find it. I knew it was the Florentine Codex because you see this little box here. Anytime you see an image like that in a box like that, it's going to be from the Florentine. Also, you can see that the drawing is Europeanized. Okay, if you look at The drawings in the Florentine, they're not in the native tradition, it's more in the European tradition. So that's a dead giveaway. That also that's the Florentine. Now there's the problem with the Florentine is everybody always cites it as the Florentine Codex, but there's actually 12 books in the Florentine Codex. So if you're going to cite it, you need to say which book it is and which page. But of course, nobody did. So I had to track it down. And it turns out this particular image is in book 4 of the Florentine Codex, which is the one I did not expect it to be, because book 4 is about the day signs and about how you're born on a particular day and you inherit the tonali qualities. So I was very surprised that it was in that book. And I'll show you the entry. This is what it looks like if you're on that page. This is the illustration section of book 4 of the Florentine Codex. Now, the thing that's really, really interesting here is that, okay, they're cooking somebody and they're eating the leg, right? Now, if you look, this is image 31. If you look down here, it says that images 25 to 31 are about one death and the associated good and ill fortune, chapter 9 of the book. So sure enough, if you go to chapter 9, they're talking about the day sign 1 death. That which turns out to be, it's a really, really good day sign because it's the day sign of Tezcatlipoca, one of the most important teteo in all of Mesoamerica. And so most of the traits that you see are very, very positive. In fact, if you look, I read the whole section. I did not read anything about this. So this image is just kind of randomly thrown in, which is very unfortunate because as you can see, a lot of people just took the image out of the context and ran away with it, right? As if this is what it actually looked like. But it's not the case. We did not see that in the Florentine Codex, book 4, in which it's held. So it's kind of just like a random picture that they put to show, I guess, the ill fortune of this day. But again, they don't mention anything about dying, or being eaten or anything like that. So it's kind of misleading when people are using this image, for those kinds of articles. Now, in the video, Traviscali did a great job of kind of talking about where this idea came from. Unfortunately, it was a man by the name of Michael Harner. He was a famous anthropologist at the time, and so yeah, just like she said in the video, he suggested that that there was victims that were boiled or roasted and even eaten. He said it was a common event in every town. And if you read the article, he's actually citing this guy right here, Bernal Diaz. Okay, so obviously he's a Spaniard. He was with Cortez, and so according to his article, anthropologists see it as a highly reliable source. Okay, and his book is called The Conquest of New Spain. And here's a direct quote from Diaz's book. It says, in the town of Tlaxcala, we found wooden cages made of lattice work in which men and women were imprisoned and fed until they were fat enough to be sacrificed and eaten. These prison cages existed throughout the country. Okay, so all of these articles, everybody's saying that, the Aztecs were cannibals. It's all coming from this. 1977. It's a really unfortunate thing that something like this has stayed with us, and it's just one of those things. It's just repeated over and over. Nobody checks the sources. The really interesting thing that Michael Harner says is that, well, because he was one of those anthropologists who was they call him the ecological anthropologist. They're trying to figure out why, like, what is the purpose of this, right? So he said, well, you know what? The purpose was conventional food in the thickly populated region was not always abundant. So he's saying that there's not enough food for the people. And he mentions, there's 25 million people living in around Tenochtitlan. He says cannibalism may have begun for purely religious reasons, but appears to have grown to serve nutritional needs because the Aztecs, unlike nearly all other civilizations, lacked domesticated herbivores such as pigs or cattle. So he said poor people gathered floated mats of vegetation from lakes, but didn't have access to the domesticated foods. All right. So, hey, at the time he was an authority, everybody said, all right, this is what it was, and ran with it. And so it's repeated in textbooks and all over the internet today. There was just 2 years later, after this was published, this argument was thoroughly dismantled. And again, I'll put the link here in the description, by a gentleman by the name of Bernard Ortiz de Montellano. Okay, and so just to summarize, he says, Tenochtitlan received large quantities of food tribute, engaged in intensive Chinampa agriculture. These two sources alone would have provided enough food practically for the entire population of the city. They also used various animals and insects that were good protein sources. The amount of protein available from human sacrifice would not have been made a significant contribution to the diet. Cannibalism was not motivated by starvation, but by belief that this was a way to commune with the gods. And so, back then in the 70s, they're still kind of using those arcane, outdated terms, such as gods, but we'll forgive him for that because this is a really good article. He actually breaks down the nutrition of all of the different foods that were very common, even to the Masawali, or what they call the poor people, right? And so, yeah, in all the sources, we know they ate corn, we know they ate beans, chia, and amaranth. Those were the four main. So he's got it down here. And sure enough, look at the protein. Okay, he's got it as 78% of, or actually this is grams, 78 grams of protein if they eat this many calories. Okay, and so pretty good. I also did my own article on this, and I put the same, staples because this is what we see over and over in the Goli says. So these are foods that we know were available to everybody. And so I put 2,000 calories total because that's like, the amount that we're supposed to eat every day. In fact, I think it's a little less than 2,000 here. And if we go to the protein, we will see that amaranth provides 19% of the protein, and then the 31 corresponds to the chia seeds, 31% of your protein, and then 31 for corn, 30 for beans, and then you've got the squash coming in at 32. Now I actually kind of summarized that here. So based on the analysis of the foods, we call it our sustenance, by the way. In the table above, before they even before adding meat, okay, there's no meat in the list. It's 143% of a person's daily required protein. Okay, this is a very high number for plant-based foods, and it's just one of the examples of the power of our ancestral foods, right? So and I also talk about how the amino acids, if you look, the amino acids they're a complete amino acid profile. And so that alone just dispels that notion that they would need to supplement their food because they're already going way more protein than they need in the first place, right? And so we can prove that pretty easily. So his argument is not really hard to disprove. Now here's the other thing. We have, okay, the guy that he's Dr. Michael Harner is saying is very reliable is this guy, Bernal Diaz del Castillo. Okay, he was in his 60s, late in life. In his 60s, he wanted to produce a first-person account of the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire. So this is the book he wrote, The True History of the Conquest of New Spain. Hey, isn't that interesting that he put true in there? He was a common soldier. He was with Cortes. Now, he wrote this book entirely to provide an alternative narrative to the critical writings of Bartolomé de las Casas, who basically documented all the horrors that the Spaniards, inflicted upon the native people and how cruel they were, right? So he was also there, and he didn't hold back. He said, yeah, the Spaniards were cruel, and they did all of these really terrible things to the native people. Well, that made Bernal Diaz del Castillo upset because he did not want, the critical writings to be the only story. And so what does he do? He narrates it in first person. He strongly defends the actions of the conquistadors while emphasizing their humanity and their honesty. And he summarizes their actions by saying, we went there to serve God and also to get rich. Okay. So Michael Harner says this is very reliable. Again, this is the guy that says he saw people in cages, right, to be fattened up to be eaten later. This is his source. Clearly, this is not going to be a reliable source. I mean, historically speaking, everybody has a reason to write history, and in this case, his reason is to strongly defend the actions of the conquistadors. Obviously, it's not going to be the best history of the conquest to read. And so he's going to embellish what the Spaniards are doing, and he's also going to demonize what the native people are doing. And so that's the other thing against Michael Harner's argument is, like, first of all, nutritionally, no, they didn't need extra protein from humans. Second of all, this guy is not reliable at all. By the way, if you want to read a reliable one, reliable history of the conquest, there's one called the History of the Indies by Diego Duran. And he cites his sources extensively, and he tries to find a balance between the Spanish and native voice. So in my opinion, that would probably be the best one, because his stated purpose was to write the most accurate conquest account that he could, right? And he uses a lot of native sources, and he dispels a lot of the notions that Diaz was talking about. In his book, you're not going to find anything like that, right? And so is it possible that Diaz made that up? Yes. I'd say it's also possible that he saw people in cages, right? But he kind of took that extra step to say, oh, they were going to be eaten. They were being fattened and eaten, but maybe they were prisoners, or there was something else going on, right? And so an outsider, a Spaniard, is not going to know the intricacies of the society, especially a foot soldier like this. He's writing in his 60s. Who knows, what he remembers accurately or not. So overall, this is not a good source for Michael Harner to, be relying on. The other thing that I really appreciated about what Tlahuizcali was mentioning is, like, she was trying to track down Pozole, right? And, I looked through all the sources, and I cannot, for the life of me, find any mention of Pozole. And it's not a surprise, because in the sources, they don't really talk about food a lot. They do talk about it, like, in passing or in general terms, but as far as, like, specific dishes, it doesn't happen very often. I have a few examples here that are from the Codex Mendoza that do talk about specific dishes, but it's hard to find. And so for them to have such a specific dish like pozole is kind of a red flag, So this is a sauce bowl and vessel. This is a tripod sauce bowl. So if you're making mole, okay, this is the kind of bowl that you would be looking for. So mole is just a sauce. That's what it means in that one. Mole is just a sauce. And so as you can imagine, there's a lot of different sauces, right? You can have green chili sauce. You can have red chili sauce. They even have smashed squash seeds. I mean, it's all the cuisine even that we see today. There's so many different kinds of moles, okay? And so it's just sauce. And so this is just the container for the sauce. And when you see this, it's holding a liquid, okay? And here's another one I found. This is on page 169. This is a turkey stew. So you have a turkey in a sauce bowl. Okay, and this is still famous today, mole de guajolote. Okay, and so this is one of the dishes that was discussed, and again, proof that a turkey was eaten probably on a pretty regular basis. I don't see even the Masawali not being able to eat or not have access to turkey. And all throughout the codices, the native people always talk about the meat of the turkey as being the best. It says the turkey leads, the meat leads the meats. Okay, the turkey meat leads is the master. It is tasty, fat, savory. And so seeing it with mole sauces is not surprising. And so those are just some examples of some foods. Now, it was interesting because Lawiscali actually mentioned a particular word that she found called Tlacatlaoli. Okay, now Tlacatlaoli is referring to corn kernels or cooked corn kernels, right? And Tlaca is referring to people. So this is basically saying, like a corn stew with people. And this here is on page 49. This is book 2 of the Florentine Codex. And it's the Dibble and Anderson English version. And the really great thing about the Florentine Codex is it's got the Nahuatl, right? You got the Nahuatl translations here. This is how we know if there's a word for this thing, we know it's real, right? This guy, Bernal Diaz, he was writing in Spanish. Who knows what was real and what was not, because he was not using Nahuatl. Once you have that Nahuatl word, then you know, all right, this is something that's real, okay? And so we see it here. Now, here's the thing. This is talking about a very specific situation. You have a captor, okay? And it says they want to eat him. They're going to eat him. They're going to cut him to pieces, and they distributed him. First of all, they made an offering of one of his thighs to Motecuzoma, and they set forth to take it to him. Let's think about this for a minute. Motecuzoma Xocoyotzin, he's the Tlatoani of Tenochtitlan. Do you really think that he needs human meat to get his protein? Clearly not, right? Like there's a whole list of foods that they ate. Obviously, he's going to have access to all kinds of meat, and there's no way that he's going to need this. So right away, we know there's something else going on here. There's something that is like a ceremonial aspect here. And we know that a captor is a warrior that's caught on the battlefield, okay? So he's caught on the battlefield, and he's brought over for his for his valor. So basically, if he's captured, it's as if he died on the battlefield. Now, something that happens, there's all kinds of ways of dying, and there's different places that you go. Most people go to Mictlan when they die. That's the land of the dead. Okay. Now, if you're a great warrior, in this case, they're talking about a great warrior. Okay, because they're saying that he has great valor. And they named him the Sun and Feather. Okay. And so here's the thing. If you die, if you get hit by lightning, for example, right? Your body becomes what we call teotl. So you transform into a teotl because you're going to Tlalocan. You go to Tlalocan, that's the domain of Tlaloc and Tlaloque. You go there, you are no longer a human being. You are a teotl. Okay, and that's a definition of a teotl, is like somebody who has access to other realms that we don't have access to, such as Mictlan. In this case, La Loca. And so those people that die those kinds of deaths and where they become teteo, their bodies become a very sacred thing, and they become embodied with this great power, right? Just like the Lalok has this great power to, throw his lightning and thunder and the storms, right? Or the sun, Tonatiuh, has this great power to give off heat for the life that we need. Same thing happens to these people. And so the captors that die, they actually go with Tonatiuh. And so if you go with Tonatiuh, you're accompanying the sun. And so you are a teotl. So at that moment, you become a very, very sacred object here. In this case, they even invited his blood relatives. They gave him gifts. They put feathers on his head. And they went to his home to eat. So clearly, they're calling his family over. Like this is a celebration, and this is a ceremonial activity, right? They're not trying to eat this captor because they're hungry, right? they're eating him because he's become something really special. He's become powerful, and there's all kinds of stories about it. Not necessarily eating, but like with the siwa teteo, also the siwa teteo are the women who died during childbirth. They did something very brave and courageous, and they also become teteo when they die, and so their bodies are imbued with this teo power. And so in those cases, the family had to bury the body in a hidden spot so that nobody knew where it was, because the belief was if you take a part of the body, in this case, they always wanted to take the arm of the siwa teteo. That was just a tradition. Well, if you take it, you inherit that power, and it becomes kind of like a shield for you. And so people did it all the time. There's actually another situation in here that I'll show you where they're actually discussing it here. It says that they took the hair from the crown of a captive's head, and they kept his hair safely. The hair is where our tonali resides. Okay, this is basically your characteristics, but also your lifetime achievements. And in typical cases, if somebody died and they went to Mictlan, they would pass down their tonali to their grandkids. That's how it worked. You died, your tonali is inherited by your grandchildren. Okay. In this case, since they're going up to the sun, the people are trying to take the tonali because it's so powerful and so great, right? And carry it with them. Hence, the idea of if we part of the body, that great power, that great tonali, all of this captured achievements will be inside of us. Okay. And so it's not, it's grisly if you think about it from a Spanish view, but if you understand it from the native worldview, it makes complete sense, right? Like, okay, we're eating this body ceremoniously. We're not doing it, as a punishment. We're not doing it to eat food. It's nothing like that, right? It's a completely different concept. And there's a lot more examples, but I'll suffice to say that that's pretty much what we're talking about. So he merited honor, flowers, tobacco, capes. His valor would not in vain perish. It was as if thus he took renown from the captives. So once again, exactly what I just said. You take a part of the body, all of his valor, all of his achievements will come to you, and you'll possess it, and it'll continue. There was also another tradition where great warriors, they would keep their bones and their body parts, and they would carry them with them for generations. And so this is a very, very common practice. And archaeologists have discovered bones that you could tell the flesh was scraped off. So, it's probably not a practice limited to Tenochtitlan, but once again, it has nothing to do with food or a lifestyle. This is a ceremonial activity. And so that's something that Michael Hunter completely didn't understand. Now this word, I'll go back to it. Tlaoli. There's an entry in the Codex Mendoza that talks about the Tlaoli part. And so it's saying about kernels of cured corn. So cooked corn is what the Tlaoli is. Okay, so I imagine some corn that's boiled or roasted would be a tlaoli. And so that's just one of the names for corn, one of many. This is on page 156. And so we know for sure, yes, they're eating it, but no, it's not for any of the reasons that Michael Hunter says. And so no, pozole is not the dish. This is not even the dish. So this is a pretty good discovery by Talawi Scali. I think Jim Alpain had mentioned it also. So those two on TikTok did a really good job there discovering this. So the word for pozole does not appear. I didn't find it anywhere actually, not even in the Codex Mendoza. And so to say that, pozole comes from this practice of eating humans is not correct, because there's actually a word for that dish, tlacatlaoli. So it's not related to pozole. These people are saying that pozole used to have human meat, then they started putting pig meat because it tasted like humans. There's all kinds of weird things that people are saying, but just know that pozole did not contain human meat at any point. There's no evidence for it at all. And if you want to discuss the meal that did, or the dish that did have human meat, well, we're not going to discuss it in terms of normal life. We're talking about ceremonial practices, which is a completely different realm. So I hope you enjoyed this. I just wanted to throw this out there because it really intrigued me, and I just wanted to trace it and see, what was the truth behind it. And so I think that we can all firmly say, there was no human meat in pozole. Tasakamati for watching. And again, check the links in the description if you want to look at some of these documents.